This episode is brought to you by Kia's first 3-row all-electric SUV, the Kia EV9, with available all-wheel drive and seating for up to 7 adults, with a 0 to 60 speed that thrills you 1 minute and available reclining lounge seats that unwind you the next. Visit kia.com/EV9 to learn more. Ask your Kia dealer for availability. No system, no matter how advanced, can compensate for all driver error and or driving conditions. Always drive safely.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Jay Hodge about his career passion of helping organizations to better engage their employees, creating more healthy workplace relationships, and the importance of humble leadership. Jay Hodge, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you, John.
I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today and joining me to discuss really important issues around leadership and employee engagement and healthy culture and all of these types of issues that are so important and so central to having effective organizations. Before we get started, though, I want to take the chance to introduce you to my listeners. Jay Hodge is the author of The Lean Treasure Chest and has spent his 25-year career in manufacturing operations, supply chain, healthcare, and operational excellence. He started by serving in the United States Marine Corps, and he grew professionally as his career progressed from frontline supervision to executive level roles as vice president at organizations like Ford, General Motors, Toyota, Caterpillar, KIK Industries, Olmec Corporation, and Tenet Healthcare. Jay is a published author and accomplished public speaker who is able to drive cultural change throughout an organization from an A-suite to the floor level. His experiences range from the implementation of effective management systems, strategy development and deployment, leadership development, focused on areas of improvement in operations and the facilitation of problem solving. He started J. Hodge & Associates LLC in 2016 and has been blessed with success simply because he understands that clients that he works with, and they're not simply organizations. They are people who are passionate about making a difference. Again, such a great profile, such a great background, a perfect fit for the goals and the aims of this podcast. And I'm really looking forward to having a great discussion with you today. Before we dive into the discussion, though, is there anything else you would like to share with the listeners?
Sure. When you read someone's bio, obviously they put everything good about them into it. But the easiest way to describe me is I'm imperfect. I have learned more over the years from my mistakes. Anything that I've accomplished, I give the credit to my mentors, to my wife, my family, and the people I've worked with. I've just been very, very blessed to be able to be in this position. And I hope anything that I say or anything that I provide during our discussion is helpful to other people.
Excellent. And I would say the same thing. We're all a big hot mess, aren't we? Like we're an amalgamation of all of the good, the bad, the ugly. And we try to learn and grow as we go and hope that over time we're able to help more people than we hurt and make a positive influence in the world around us. So I feel the same way, like I can look back and sometimes horror, I can look back on my past life. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I did that. Or I can't believe I said that. Because it's like, so like there are times I'm having a discussion with my wife and she said, well, once you said this, I'm like, what? I said that? Like, I can't even, like in my current frame of thinking, I can't even imagine ever thinking it, let alone saying it. You know what I mean? And so, or same thing with behaviors and actions. Like, I'm like, I can't even remember ever thinking that way. How could I ever have behaved that way? So I think that's how it is for all of us. You know, we're all kind of shuffling through this world, trying to do the best we can, and hopefully we're taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but making steady progression as we go.
Absolutely. It's funny you talk about that. People always talk about, education and experience and wisdom. And it's one thing that my dad taught me over the years is that, wisdom doesn't come just because you get to the age of 55 or 60 or 65. Wisdom is a result of experiences, and experiences, both good and bad. You learn from your experiences, and the wisest people in the world have probably learned more from their mistakes than they do their failures. And I personally think that's what makes a person wise, is that they are able to look in the mirror and go, man, I really screwed that up royally. That was a mistake. And this is how I should have done it differently. And that's really where wisdom comes from, whether it's in leadership, in relationships, anything. I think it's a great point my dad taught me. So, and it's played out perfectly in my career.
Yeah, that's a great insight. And I completely agree. It's hard to look inward and to really acknowledge our errors and our mistakes. That takes a level of security and confidence in ourselves to be willing to do that. It's quite easy to look at others and point out their mistakes, and we can learn from that. But some of the deepest growth that really can occur is when we're really introspective and we're really willing to hold that mirror up, like you said, and just take a deep, long look, and then make course corrections and hopefully improve. So none of us are immune from it. So it's the big lifelong goal for steady improvement. Well, Jay, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, as we're launching off the discussion today, what really drives you? What's your passion, and why did you start your company? You have a long, diverse career. What got you to where you're at now?
What really got to me where I am now is the fact that I think I was like so many young leaders coming up, looking for direction and looking for mentors. Everyone starts out with these aspirations that, you're going to start out as a frontline supervisor, and you're going to end up in the corner office, 60 floors up, looking over the city, doing strategy deployment, going to board meetings. And what I see that we do a lot of times is we fail to teach people and mentor people on those 20 years between where they are and where that's going to happen. Because realistically, if someone does it the right way, not stepping on people, actually being a good leader, it's going to take 15, 20 years to get to that point. And they'll get to that point. But I think sometimes that when you end up at that point, how you got there is far more important than where you ended up. And when I work with organizations, I see a lot of young leaders. I see a lot of, directors and even senior leaders who are so hungry for not just getting somewhere, but getting there right and leaving a legacy. Because when you look back, and you and I kind of talked about this at the beginning, when I look back and I see the people that I've impacted, that's really my how I define success. Having my own company, being very successful is great, but nothing gets me going more than getting a call up from someone that I've mentored and that says, hey, Jay, remember those lessons that you taught, or the discussions that we had, or the time that you pulled me aside and say, listen, you better pull yourself together, take a breath, and think about the big picture. I said, remember those times we had those discussions? Well, guess what? I just got promoted to senior director at a Fortune 500 company. And I go, you know what? That I was part of that. I don't take credit for it, but for me, those are the trophies. And I don't have trophies in my office, but those are the trophies that I take with me every single day. When people call me to say, hey, I got here and you were part of it, That's really what it's all about. And so I started my company 4.5 years ago because every organization out there has this idea of what excellence looks like. And they say, this is where we are, this is where we want to go. And they create these great strategies, these awesome pieces of paper. Takes 2 to 3 days at the executive level. They create all of this, and then they feed it to their team and say, go do it. And then you have a bunch of senior leaders or directors or managers sitting there going, okay, but organizations don't take the strategic level into tactical action plans, what I refer to as the waterfall, from that level all the way down to every other level, because it's not the senior leaders who are actually going to accomplish that strategy through the tactical objectives. It's the team members. And the team members want so much to know how to succeed. They want to know what success looks like. But if we never take our strategy from here down to here, they don't know what success looks like. And in fact, a lot of times we don't even communicate with them this one up here, whether we're achieving it or not. They get the end of the year results, whether they get a bonus or not. So, my passion is helping people from the CEO to the line leader understand that connection that has to take place with them for them to really understand what success is. I've asked many companies, how does your customer define what success is? And they run through all of these different strategic level objectives. I said, no, how does your customer define when you succeed? How does that person walking into the ED, how do they define success when they walk out? What are the things that they look at? And it's amazing. I'll sit in a room with 50, 60 executives or whatever, and I'll say, do me a favor, write down everything you think your customers value. And what's amazing is that even if it's 10 people, out of 10 people, they all have different answers. They may have some of the same answers, but then I'll bring directors or managers in the room, and I'll have them make the same list. And we have this plethora. And what it tells me, this is some of where my passion is that it tells me that we think we're not all on the same page. And I don't know if you've ever been in the military or not, but I was in the Marines for years, and on a ship, and I'm giving the Navy credit here. I don't do this very often, but hey, on a ship, everybody's pointed in the same direction. You don't have a choice. You're on the same ship. With organizations, we have to do the same thing. We have to get everybody pointing in the same direction. So my passion and why I do what I do is because when you watch people get pointed in the same direction and all of a sudden they have these aha moments and they realize that they're part of a team and they realize actually what a team actually is, it's amazing to watch the cultural transformation. A lot of what I do is implement management systems, visual management systems, but it's really nothing more than a cultural transformation wrapped in a management system. It's really what it is. That's why I do what I do.
That's awesome. And as you were describing you mentioned several really important things there. But as you were describing strategic management and creating strategic plans, it just reminded me how often organizations really fail quite remarkably in terms of how they carry out their strategic plans. I'm a big believer in strategic planning, but in and of itself, is just an exercise just so you have something on paper doesn't really do much other than it's a healthy exercise. But where it has power is when you actually can then connect it down the line and communicate it clearly and have clear expectations and metrics and hold people accountable and let people know how the performance is going as time moves on. And those are all the elements that, frankly, in my experience, most organizations don't do that. They just kind of create the document and then they might share it with people and then they revisit it a year later or something to update it. And that's just not effective. It's kind of like the whole movement away from annual reviews and performance management. Many organizations have decided annual reviews just aren't effective, and they're not. There's tons of research that shows only doing a year-end review doesn't really do much of anything to help employees' performance. It's either it has no real effect or it actually has a detrimental effect. And so organizations in the last decade or so have started to adopt this no more annual reviews model and moving more towards an ongoing feedback model, more regular discussions and conversations, and maybe quarterly reviews or whatever. There's lots of different ways that organizations do it. Because they recognize that the annual review in and of itself didn't really do anything. It was just this practice that people got into the habit of doing, and it became a tradition of it, and nobody stopped to really think for a long time about whether or not it was effective. Again, coming back to what you said, I mean, so many organizations with strategic planning, they do the same thing. They don't carry it out in a way that will actually provide the benefits of going through the process.
Right.
And it takes time, right? It takes time and energy and attention over a sustained period of time. And that's why it doesn't happen often, because people's focus gets pulled in different directions.
Yeah, it's kind of like I had someone use the analogy years ago. It's like designing the most beautiful automobile. I mean, you design it, you clay it out, you fab out the outside, but when you open the hood, there's no engine. When you open the doors, there's no seat, there's no steering wheel. A strategy by itself is like the shell of a car. It's beautiful, and I mean, everyone looks at it and goes, ooh, ah, but it's absolutely serves no purpose. There's no functionality to it. And the amazing thing, and I don't think organizations truly understand how effective a strategy deployment activity can be if they drive it all the way down to the team. I've asked numerous leaders in a hospital, when's the last time you actually drew blood? When's the last time you actually performed a CT scan? When's the last time you took a patient to the restroom? When's the last time you administered an IV? When's the last time you prepped them for a procedure? And the answers are, well, it's been years. I'm like, when you talk about your strategy deployment, it's just a document. But when you talk about what you're truly trying to accomplish, it happens at the patient level, or it happens at the customer level for an auto manufacturer. It happens where your product or your service is actually being interfaced with the customer. And so if you never drive your strategy to that point, your strategy isn't a strategy. It's literally just a piece of paper. So.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely. So translating, a leader's vision to tactical practice down the line can be really tough. That's what we've been talking about. There's lots of things about leadership that's really difficult. What would you say to leaders is the most important thing as a leader? What's the most important thing to pass on to future leaders? Humility.
And I can say this since I've been from frontline supervisor to vice president. As we move up, what ends up happening is we lose, the farther up we move, the more we lose as far as the understanding of the day-to-day interaction. Great example, I took a director in a hospital. I said, okay, you're the director of this department. You know everything, right? And this was a person who was struggling with humility and with understanding that they didn't know everything. I said, okay, we're going to take you and we're going to put you in one of the most basic tasks in this department. We walked up to the nurse's station. I told the person, the HUC, who does the phone, basically the air traffic control for that department. I said, go ahead and stand up for me. And I told the director, have a seat. You are now the HUC for the next 4 hours. Good luck. What happened within 1 minute is that they could not figure out the phone system, because the phone system changes on an ongoing basis. They're upgrading it. They're doing all these things. They didn't understand how this doctor wanted to be communicated with. They didn't know where to find these numbers. And what it did is it proved a point to this director, and it proves a point, if you ever do this, that the farther we move from that ground level activity with the teams, the more we forget about the interaction, the day-to-day task level, micro level interactions required to perform those tasks or those processes. So when I talk with leaders, the first thing I talk with about it is humility, accepting the fact that you are a leader of the experts. You are not the expert anymore. And I think if I pass that on to anybody, what it does is it creates a look, or it's what I refer to as a look in the operational mirror. Take a good look in the operational mirror. None of us like to look in the mirror, to be honest, because I got blemishes on my face. My one eye is higher than the other. This ear has a wrinkle over it. This one doesn't. I'm not symmetrical. I am just one hot mess, right? But when we look in the operational mirror, what it does is it allows us to be honest with ourselves, and allows us to understand that we're not the greatest thing since sliced bread. We don't walk on water. There's nothing perfect about us. But the greatest thing about that is that when our team members see that we acknowledge that, it opens them up to us. Because everybody out here that's listening to this has probably had a leader or a director or a VP that thought they were God's gift to the earth, and they didn't like them. And one of the reasons they didn't like them is that because they didn't feel like they were ever their equal, that they were ever able to be a part of what we're trying to accomplish. So humility, it's absolutely the first step. It goes back to servant leadership. Humility is probably the biggest thing for me when I'm working with new leaders. And I've had organizations that I've worked with where I could tell from the beginning there wasn't a level of humility, and I didn't take the engagement, because I knew that if I couldn't get the leaders to understand that they were part of the team, not the team, that the organization would never accomplish what it needed to accomplish.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you referenced servant leadership. That's something I feel very passionately about, and humility is a key component to that. It manifests itself in many ways, but truly remarkable leaders, they're intellectually humble, they're procedurally humble, like they just interact with people in a more relatable way. And that you mentioned it, but the challenge of being a leader in an organization is that you start to be put in a bubble. You start to find yourself in an echo chamber, whether that's what you want or not, unless you take very proactive steps to counteract that. Pretty soon you're going to be surrounded by people where you're just hearing the same things over and over again, that echo chamber. Oftentimes leaders attract sycophants who are just basically yes men telling them what they want to hear because they're trying to leverage their next opportunity. And so you have to work hard the higher up you go to be more connected to the front lines and really the touch points with the customer. And that requires humility, because a lot of times leaders, they progress in their career after having great success. They're intellectually, they're intellectually successful. They're operationally successful. They have had this career and they've been put into positions. And so now they feel like they've earned it. And I suppose they have, but they, like you said, they're not the experts anymore. They're the leaders of experts, and they need to be able to continue to tap into it. And it's the age-old cautionary tale, but so many leaders fail at that simple act of just remaining humble and staying authentically connected to the people at the lower levels of the organization and the customers. So I love everything you said there.
I had an organization a while back I went and worked with. Great leader, but he struggled with what we were talking about. And when I got there, I like to spend a month or so just evaluating the leadership, talking with them, developing those relationships, because everything I do is relationship based. And one of the things that we found, and he agreed 100%, which is why he had called me, is that he had leaders. He was at the top level, him and two others. They made most of the decisions for the organization. And what I found is that the reason that they made most of the decisions for the organization is because they had always made all the decisions for the organization. And what ends up happening is you've got your CEO, CFO, CHRO, COO, and they make all these decisions. Well, after a while, if the people under them, the VPs and the senior directors and directors, if no one listens to their opinion, to their decisions, no one's asking them anymore, then they stop thinking about it. And they just automatically say, oh, here's this, you make the decision. And so he had created an organization where nobody made decisions. They were afraid to, because they had been overridden so many times. Well, why put me in a VP position or why put me in a director position if you're not going to actually trust me to make a decision? And so they stopped making decisions. And so these senior leaders were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe people are asking us to make this decision. Why aren't they making the decisions at that level? It's because you trained them to do it. We hire people and we put them in positions because we think they're absolutely capable, but then we cut their legs out when we don't let them make decisions, or we second guess them, or they make a bad decision and we just destroy them. And so they're never going to make another decision. And he realized that with his senior team, that it was them that had caused that culture to be created. And it took a while of trust and engagement, because at that point, people are gun shy about making a decision because they don't want to get in trouble. And they're wondering, why are they letting me make this decision? This hasn't happened for years. There's something going on. And it took a while, but once people started being trusted again and able to make those decisions, it was really fun to watch. Once again, that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, and you highlight the contrast between a top-down hierarchical organization that doesn't empower people versus an organization where you're trusting your employees and where you're leveraging their expertise and their passions to generate greater innovations, better decision making, and better outcomes, right, for the business. It's not easy to do, but it's also not rocket science. As you just mentioned, there's simple things that leaders do all the time that they end up shooting themselves in the foot that they could easily avoid. And then there's other simple things that they could do to just proactively make a really nice, healthy culture moving forward. So, it takes intentionality. It takes just an awareness and a commitment to just to be a positive leader. And it comes back to what you said about being a humble leader and being willing to listen and just pay attention to those that are below you in the organization that report to you.
Yep. It's one of those things that when you teach young managers as they move up, a lot of times we get into manager positions and people come to us with questions and we think that we need to answer those questions. I mean, that's our job. It's our job to answer those questions. But what we do is we create that environment where people are always coming to us, asking a question, waiting, what do you think we should do? And I teach very young supervisors and managers, in fact, I teach everybody this, that when someone comes to you, one of your team comes to you with a question, it may take a little longer than just saying, do this, but ask them, what do you think? And when they give you the answer, why do you think that? And walk them through the decision-making process. And what we end up doing at almost every level in an organization is creating an organization where people are thinking about how to make the correct decisions and why to make the correct decision. And all of a sudden, instead of being bombarded 30 times a day with people sticking their head in our office and saying, hey, I'm getting ready to do this. You okay with that? We've created a group of people that are capable of making good decisions from the beginning, instead of just giving them the, yep, do this, yep, do that, or don't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jay, this has been a real honor to have the opportunity to talk with you. It's been a fun discussion. We're about out of time, but I want to give you a moment to share with the listeners how they can get in contact with you, how they can find out more about you. Sure,
absolutely. The easiest way to get a hold of me is to go through our company website. It's that's my email address. I'll just give you my email address if you want to get a hold of me. It's jay.hodge at the letter J and then HODGEASSOC.com. And our website is HODGEASSOC.com. So pretty simple. And the website talks, it's got a bunch of different tabs, pages, testimonials, references. You can buy the book. And the book's on Audible, it's on Kindle, it's hardback, whatever you want. So, but John, I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. You obviously have a passion for what I have a passion for, and that's helping people and helping them grow. There's a lot of people out there who have great potential.
Well said, Jay. It's been great talking with you. I encourage my listeners to reach out to Jay and to learn more about what he is doing in his company. Again, thank you for joining me, and I hope everyone has a wonderful week.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital, exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us.